Should the American people be concerned about Iran? Yeah, we ought to be very concerned about Iran. They're a destabilizing influence.
President Bush may consider Iran a dangerous menace, but is his counterpart in Iraq on the same page? When Bush met with Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki late last year in Jordan, they were cordial but formal. Compare that to this week when Maliki traveled to Iran, where he displayed a cozy relationship with that country's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. It's just the latest sign of Iran's rising influence in the Middle East and the challenge that it's posing for the United States. CNN's Middle East correspondent Anish Rahman is in Cairo right now. At the Pentagon, CNN's Barbara Starr, and with me in the studio is Joseph Cirincione of the Center for American Progress. Barbara, let me start with you. With everything we've been through in the past few years, does anybody at the Pentagon actually want a military conflict with Iran?
No, is the simple answer. Nobody here is talking about getting into a shooting war with Iran. In fact, Defense Secretary Robert Gates, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, both have said for months now there are no plans for a war with Iran. They want to go down the route of diplomacy. But with Iran's influence inside Iraq, that may be very tough. In the month of July alone, Tom, 99 attacks against U.S. troops using weapons that the U.S. believes were made in Iran. How do you keep ignoring that?
Well, Joseph, let's look at that. We have the sense that while we've been trying to push a surge to calm things down, a sense at the highest levels of government here that Iran has had a surge of their own to make things worse. So it looks like it's not working. What are we supposed to do?
Well, part of what you have to do is take a look at this from Iran's point of view. What they see is a civil war in Iraq, and they are aiding their ally. Their ally, the Shia militia, is under attack from U.S. forces. Just this week, while President Maliki was in Tehran, there was a major attack by U.S. forces against the Mahad army in Baghdad itself. So they are aiding that army. They don't see it as an attack on the U.S. They see it as support for their allies.
I want to zoom in on the map behind here and talk about these cultural boundaries, which we talk about a lot. This, if you divide the region based on Shia, Sunni, and Kurds, look, here's Iran over here, right. Here's Iraq. But you can see how Iran would say our area of influence should go all the way inside here. And as we turn to our other wall over here, look at what Iran wants right now as they look at Iraq and as they look at the region. They want nuclear technology. They want reduced U.S. presence in Iraq. They want a stable Iraq under Shia rule, and they want respect and influence. Anish, do the other neighbors of Iraq want Iran to have those things?
No is the simple answer. The other neighbors are aware that Iran has been rising as a political force within the region. Saudi Arabia specifically, as we talk about Iran and Peter mentioning their support in what they see as a civil war and Shia is under attack by the Americans, the Saudis increasingly see the Sunni population in Iraq under threat of the Shia militias there. And there's more open talk in this region about that broader civil war and sort of the apocalyptic scenario, which isn't just an anarchy and chaotic Iraq, but one where Saudi and Iran are openly fighting a proxy war through their allegiances and through their inside that country. So Iran wants all those things. The big balancing act that the U.S. has, at least, is that they're neighbors in the region that don't want Iran to have all those things. And if Iran has it, they want it. They want access to nuclear technology if Iran's going to have it. They want more arms if Iran's going to have it. So the U.S. is playing that as well.
So, Barbara, the Pentagon trots out folks who say, look at the way Iran is shipping in. Look at how Iran is trying to destabilize Iraq. But they don't want to fight Iran. What do they think they're going to accomplish with these dog and pony shows, in a sense, showing off the weapons from Iran?
Well, the strategy is to go after the smuggling rat lines, if you will, the fighters coming in, the networks, the bomb factories, all of that, the financing, all of the things that the U.S. believes Iran is doing through its very secretive Al-Quds force inside Iraq. They're showing the weapons. They're talking to the Iranians. Part of it's diplomacy. Part of it is to, they believe, maybe to embarrass Iran into complying. But so far, it doesn't really seem to be working because even as the U.S. is talking to Iran, these weapons keep flowing into Iraq, Tom.
Joseph, Iran doesn't look like it can be much embarrassed about anything. It wants power.
It does want power. It wants respect also. It sees itself as the major power in the region, and historically it's always played a role in the region. So naturally they should have influence over the activities of their neighbors. And in fact, one of the problems for the U.S. is that the presidents of both Iraq and Afghanistan see Iran as a friend, as an ally. Both have visited Tehran. Iran has contributed major reconstruction aid to both countries. So our presidents in Afghanistan and Iraq are out of sync with the U.S. policy. One final point, the U.S. is also ambivalent itself about what to do with Iran. And there are some elements in the U.S. government that do want to take stronger action, maybe even attack Iran. And you heard the president refer to this ominously in his conference this week, that Iran will have to pay a price for its continued. We know the vice president is keen to take military strikes against Iran. This is a dynamic we'll have to watch very closely in the months ahead.
But unless we are willing to do that militarily,
yes,
isn't it awfully dangerous to be making threats?
It is. So what happens is you build up tensions on both sides. The rhetoric rises. Remember, the troops are very close to each other in these forces, and you may have an incident involving U.S. and Iranian forces that could spark a larger conflict. That's actually the scenario I worry the most about.
Anish, let's turn very briefly. I want you to listen as we look at what the United States wants out of this whole thing. They would like a regime change in Iran. They'd like Iran to stop meddling in Iraq, and they don't want any nukes in Iran. What do the neighbors think about that, Anish?
Well, when you talk about regime change at all in the Middle East, and then you talk about Middle Eastern neighbors, they're aware that if they support that in Iran, it's likely as a mirror to come back on them. So there's not much talk about regime change. There is talk that if Iran's going to have access to nuclear technology, the neighbors would like it. Gulf states have looked into having it for themselves as well. There's a notion of one-upsmanship, that whatever Iran is getting by virtue of the fact that the U.S. is bogged down in Iraq and that Iran is rising as a power in the Middle East, the other countries want it as well. Keep in mind, for decades, the political paradigm of the Middle East has been Sunni governments backed by the U.S. It's only been in the past year or so, since Mahmoud Ahmadinejad took office, that we have seen Iran rise. We have seen talk of this Shia crest with Iran, the southern part of Iraq, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And that is what is changing things on the ground and keeping the neighbors very weary of what Iran gets and pushes for and what the world eventually allows it to have.
Many thanks, Anish, Barbara, and Joseph as well. While the Bush administration is issuing